Hello and welcome to MS-Auto Live. I am Mert from MS-Auto. Today we have a long title, Connect Your Service to the Cloud with Azure Hybrid Management. And my guest is Vukasin Terzic today. This is the second time he will be with us. Vukasin, welcome.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here again.
We are very excited you to be here. And Vukasin, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. So my name is Vukasin Terzic. I live most of the year between Czech Republic and California, but I'm currently now in Prague. I work as a solution architect in a consulting company called KPCS that is based here in Prague, and we primarily focus on Microsoft technologies. In my current role, I focus mostly on helping customers with their journey to the cloud, but I also design and implement infrastructure services and on-premises technologies like, I don't know, servers, Hyper-V, Active Directory. And I also teach Microsoft courses, mostly focused on Azure and Windows Server as well. But I haven't been teaching that much this year because of all the situation and things that are going on in the world and all the quarantines and stuff.
Okay, thank you. I want to ask you about the title. What is exactly Azure Hybrid Management?
Right. I think I should be sharing my screen now. So if you can see that.
Okay.
Right. So today I would like to talk about what is the Azure Hybrid Management and how we can use it to help out with our management of our on-premises services. But maybe forget this. Maybe before we actually describe how we can work with how we can use it to manage our on-premises environment, maybe we should first answer why and when, and that will also answer your question, what this exactly is. So if you only have our environment in on-premises world and we run all of our workloads there, we already have a set of tools to manage those workloads, right? Those can be built-in tools like server management or PowerShell, or we can and should be using Windows Admin Center as well. Or we have tools like System Center configuration management, virtual machine management, and so on. And with those tools, we are able to manage our local environment just fine. We have everything we need. But our environments are evolving and they are becoming increasingly complex. And nowadays we have many applications that are often running on different hardware across on-premises data centers and multiple clouds from different cloud providers. And right now, I have more than one customer that is using their own private cloud in their data center. They also use Azure and they also use AWS at the same time. And this can still be manageable, but we have to use those different tools from different providers to manage each environment. And then that also increases administrative effort. We have to learn new things to keep up with new technologies. And sometimes we end up having dedicated teams to work on those different technologies. And I see this as a problem. It brings some administrative effort. And I'm not even going to mention, but it's very difficult to maintain the security standards across the organization once we have all of this. So I think you get the point. And what's the solution for that? Well, that's easy. We put everything in one place. No, well, obviously that's not going to work. Our public clouds offer many features that are easy to use and they're easy to connect, and we shouldn't be preventing ourselves from using it. And it will be foolish to say that using cloud-only strategy is always the best and cheapest solution for every situation. Really, it is not, and we should be using best of both worlds. So now I'm coming to the hybrid management. And Azure is built from ground up to be a hybrid cloud. That might not be obvious at first because Microsoft before tried to push everything to be cloud only, but Microsoft's strategy is hybrid now. They realized that early in the process, and they use their advantage of owning like many services we use on premises, and such as Windows Server, and connect those services to Azure, and this works great. So as you can see in this picture, we have on the left side of the picture, we have some services that are actually the hybrid services that allows us to connect with Azure from our on-premises environment. And usually it's because, for example, we run out of space, and so we use cloud to add more disk storage, or we want to have our data quickly accessible by customers on the other side of the planet, or we want to have offsite backup for disaster recovery to different location to be safe. And Azure is there. All those services are easy to connect and easy to set up, and so we start using it. But what I really want to talk about today are the services on the right side of the pictures, and those are the services that let us manage our own on-premises environment from cloud. Just to be clear, these are not all the services in Azure Hybrid portfolio. It's much larger than that. It also includes services like Azure Stack Family or Azure IoT. And those, or especially Azure Stack, can be used to manage our servers as well. But that will also require some new implementations. So we are going to focus on things that we can use with what we already have. As you can see, there are many services there for us to use in Azure Hybrid. And it's very important to understand that those services, they don't compete with each other. They are actually complement each other, and they can all play important role in our strategy when we start planning the cloud. So once we start using the Azure, we start creating new resources, we start learning how to manage them. And this is when we realize that there are some unique management features that we never had before, and we start liking them, of course, like Azure Policy, tags, ARM templates, even Azure Monitor or Security Center are very useful things that we didn't have those in on-premises, and we couldn't easily enforce like naming policy for our VMs or naming policy for our network cards in those VMs, or ensure that when VM is created, it's being backed up automatically. So at least we couldn't do it without third-party tools. And so let's take a little bit closer look at those tools and see what Azure can do for us. By the way, I forgot to mention in the beginning, if you have any questions, please don't be afraid to ask. We will have a Q&A time in the end of this session, so you can come back to it and we can answer your questions. So first thing that I mentioned is Azure Security Center. So I'm not going to go too deeply into those features, but I want to give you an idea of what they are and how they can help us. And also I will try to show where you can find them and how easy it is to connect them. So Azure Security Center is a built-in feature in Azure. It's a security management and help us actually track the status and security situation and configuration of our environment in Azure. But it can also be connected to our data center and provide some threat protection and notifications for there as well. This might be surprising for some of you, but it's really easy to connect, and we can actually use a Windows Admin Center, and from within Windows Admin Center we can connect and start using Azure Security Center. Another function is Azure Monitor. So for us, I think for our purpose, more specifically, it's a virtual machine insights feature that we look for. And this, if you use Azure Portal, you know that for each virtual machine, you can see some health and performance, and you can look for events, you can create email alerts, and you can have everything consolidated in one dashboard. So the same thing can be applied to our on-premises servers, and then you can see those in the same dashboard with your your Azure connected virtual or Azure virtual machines. That means that from one place you can monitor all of your virtual machines or even physical servers on premises. And that's great. For me, I really like that because configuring on-premises, and you should have that already, by the way, but configuring on-premises monitoring solution and alerting solution can be difficult, it can be time-consuming. You probably need a special server for it. And connecting it to Azure Monitor, it's easy, and it's a service that you don't have to take care of. It's a platform service that is there for you and ready to use. Next one is Azure Update Management. And I talked about Azure Update Management in the past many times. And it's one of my favorite features actually in Azure, well, hybrid portfolio. It helps us manage and deliver updates to our Azure and on-premises servers. And guess what? This can also work for Linux servers. It doesn't support client OS, so we cannot use it to update, to deliver updates for Windows 10, but for servers, it works great. Everything is configured inside of the Azure Automation account. You can configure update schedule, select specific VMs in the group or physical servers you want to update. You can configure maintenance window. You can configure what type of updates you want to deliver, and that's it. You schedule it, and it helps you deliver update, and you can even restart the servers, and configuration is really easy, but it actually has everything you need for delivering updates. And for Linux servers, it uses desired state configuration, so those updates are delivered as well. And as I said, it runs inside of the automation account. And for you to start using it, there are basically no prerequisites. You just click enable and you start using it. So this is great feature. And if you are struggling with managing update for your on-premises servers, then Azure Update Management is a tool for you to use. You don't necessarily need any kind of VPN or express router or tunnel between your Azure and on-premises. You can do this over the internet as well. And then there are two more features that I want to show. One of them is Azure Site Recovery. And Azure Site Recovery doesn't necessarily manage your on-premises servers, but it is connected to your on-premises and helps you to replicate, say like that, replicate servers from on-premises to some region in Azure. And in case of a disaster recovery, we can easily switch our main running virtual machine from on-premises to Azure. And this is a great feature that can also be used for migrating server to Azure, because you actually replicate and you switch without losing the data. So that's another feature for what it can be used. And I have to say that it's also one of my favorite features in Azure, because it saved me a few times, or my clients saved a few times when we didn't have a disaster recovery and there was a fire or something like that. And it was very easy and quick to configure, and we could protect our data in a short time. So Azure Site Recovery, great feature. It works with Hyper-V. It also works with the VMware or with the physical servers. So you can replicate those to Azure. And then once you're done, if you want to return it back to your on-premises environment, then you can also replicate your virtual machine from your Azure subscription back to your on-premises server, and then do the failover and switch it, and it works there as well. It supports Azure Site Recovery supports like multi-layer applications. So if you want to run, if you, for example, have like a database application server and then the web server, you can also configure in which order those servers will be turned off and turned on. And if there are some dependencies, you can also run like pre-script and like post-run scripts to do some additional actions that you can script, for example, in PowerShell. So that's a great feature. And the next one is Azure Backup. So Azure Backup is one of the features that is really well priced in Azure, and it allows you to easily configure offsite backup, which means that you can create a backup that is stored somewhere else in case of disaster in your environment. It's you have the data safe and protected because they were somewhere else. It works again with individual machines or with clusters. It works great with the Hyper-V and VMware as well. And it's the option. It can also be configured in few clicks from Windows Admin Center. And I hope most of you are using Windows Admin Center for configuration of the Azure environment, or sorry, I'm sorry, for the configuration and management of on-premises environment. And I heard that some of my clients started using Windows Admin Center when it was introduced a couple of years ago, and then in the beginning didn't have that much features, so they abandoned it. But if that's the case for you, then I suggest that you check it again with the newest version. They brought up many features, and once you have it connected to Azure, it allows you to all of those features that you see here on this image to configure directly from Windows Admin Center without actually leaving your Windows Admin Center. And then you can use everything to manage back your on-premises environment. And the last feature we are going to cover today is Azure Arc. So Azure Arc it's a big feature that it was introduced last year on Microsoft Ignite, and they made a huge marketing and campaign around it, and it just recently came out of preview for servers at least. So I have a experience with Azure Arc in production, as well as extensive testing from beginning when it was early introduced. And so what that brings to us, it's basically a feature that allows us to connect our on-premises servers to Azure and then extend Azure management to those servers that are on-premises. It can connect to individual servers or servers at scale. And we connect the server to our Azure subscription, and it shows in Azure as just another VM, Azure VM. Well, we cannot completely manage it as we are used to with Azure VMs because physically it's not there, but it lets us transfer most of the features to it. And so how that works and what does it bring? I included one of my tweets here. So when this came out, I started managing with Azure Arc virtual machines that were running in AWS. And I connected them to Azure Arc, and I was able to do some management of that. And the idea behind it is that you have one portal that we all know, Azure portal, And in there, you connect your virtual machines that are on-premises servers in your private cloud, in your data center, at your home server, in other public clouds. You connect them to one place. They get the Azure Resource ID. They show up in Azure portal as another virtual machine. And from there, you are able to apply policies, rollback, RBAC roles, implement security, adopt cloud practices, basically, which means that you can deliver governance and everything like that. And I really like it. It's the feature that is not completely, I think, finished yet. They are still bringing every like now and then they bring new features and allows us to do more. But let me, I think I have a slide on how it works. Yeah, I think this slide will explain it a little bit more. We are able to manage our virtual machines in Azure as we are used to, and some of that and part of that manageability is accessible through Azure Arc, to which we can connect our on-premises servers, our Kubernetes clusters, and our databases. Kubernetes and databases part is still in preview, still not in production, but it came out of private preview, which is good, which means that most of us can test it now. And for the virtual machines, it's already it's generally available, and we can start using it in production. So what are the benefits of this? Why would we want to do this? So the first is, of course, that we have Azure Portal and we can manage it from one place, centralized location from where we can at least see all the virtual machines we have. And sometimes it can be a problem only the thing that you have to look into documentation to find out what virtual service you are running, because you have some of them here, some of them there, and you are not connecting all the dots. We can apply compliance and security capabilities of Azure Security Center for all our cloud resources. And what's new here is that before we could connect our virtual machines running in Hyper-V server, for example, to Azure in some way, but for other cloud providers like AWS, it was very difficult to connect unless it was an agent configure connection. It was difficult to connect some servers and see them in Azure. With Azure Arc, it's possible. We can onboard those servers and use them and see them there. And then again apply patching through Azure Update Management, apply policies, add tags. I hope everyone is using tags, and if you are using Azure, that you are adding tags to all of your resources, because it's once you start using it, it's really get useful after you forget who actually created this virtual machine and for what reason. So using tags is very important, and now you can add tags even to your local servers, and now you will manage it from cloud. And you can also apply policy to apply those tags for you. Then we have monitoring and insights of Azure Monitor that I mentioned. That's automatically there for you. You can start using it immediately once you connect your server with Azure Arc. Then we have ARM templates, and I don't know how many of you are using actually ARM templates, but we can apply like role-based access control policies and tagging through those templates for VMs that are actually outside of Azure. We can, one thing that I personally don't have explored much, but it's there, is that I think that Azure Arc is very useful and ideal actually for DevOps teams. Instead of several different cloud control panels that you probably need in your multi-cloud, multi-layer application, you can run and deploy all those applications and services and systems if you need whenever you need them and manage them from one unified interface. And that's the feedback I'm getting from my customers and even from my colleagues, that where Azure Arc and Azure Hybrid is actually excel, because you manage everything in automated fashion from one single place. And so today, the next half of our talk, I would like to show you how we can use Azure Arc, how we can connect a server that is running in a different Azure subscription, but that can as well be a server that is running in our own premises or AWS, and what features we get once it gets connected. Don't forget to ask questions. Oh, I see I have one question, so maybe I can answer that now. So the difference between Azure Stack and Azure Arc is that the Azure Stack portfolio, we have few actually Azure Stack services, so I'm not sure which one you are asking about. But if you have Azure Stack HCI, for example, that means that you are creating a cloud-connected Hyper-V highly virtualized hyper-converged cluster in your environment, and by that you don't get too much difference. It's almost the same, because you can only use those services that I just mentioned, but you don't have to go through the process of registering it within Azure Arc. But if you use Azure Stack Edge, I think it's called, then you are basically bringing full Azure to your on-premises environment, and you can use the Azure portal to manage your Azure with all the features. And only difference is that you use your own hardware, not Azure hardware, and you get limited resources that are limited by your hardware you are using. So that's the difference. And then we have Azure Stack IoT, or no, that's different. That's different product. That's IoT Edge. Okay, I hope that answered your question. So let's take a look at the demo. Right. So I have a test subscription here. I only have to go to Azure Arc. I can find it here in search. And now we have three options here. As I mentioned before, we have Azure Arc for servers. We can manage Kubernetes, and we can also manage our data. Those two options are in preview, and we are only interested in Azure Arc for servers. You can see that in this subscription, I don't have any Azure Arc connected servers. I did have few, but I deleted them just before this demo. What we have to do is to do the onboarding process. Onboarding process requires us to install agent on the virtual machine, or if you are doing it with a cluster, the process will be the same, but a little bit easier for multiple number of virtual machines. And I lost my, okay. Once we connect the agent, then we will be able to see the process, the computer here. We can do that manually, one computer at a time, or there is a way to do it at scale. And basically the process is identical. We have to run a script on a computer, but for deployment on scale, we can create a service principal name that will be used to authenticate, and we don't have to run it one by one, but we can run it across our entire portfolio of our servers. And so Microsoft made this very easy now, because we don't have to write a script on our own, and we don't have to download the clients that have to be configured triggered later on. Instead of that, we get a script that is generated for us from here. If basically we do our basic configuration, we can choose the resource group into which the server will be connected. We can choose, and this is important to understand, you cannot create a resource in Azure that is not inside of the resource group. So it means that you have to put it in a resource group. We can choose if you want a Windows or Linux. Maybe that's something that I forgot to mention actually, but you can also use Azure Arc for Linux servers. And you can specify the connection proxy URL. We don't have that. And then you create the tags, and those are the tags that will be added to this resource. So I'm going to say just this. And we get the script. And so let's take a look at the script before we do that. So the script is going to download the agent MSI, and then specify the log file and run it with provided configuration. And our provided configuration is script. The whole script is not visible, but okay. So I downloaded the PS1 file, and now the thing I have to do is to run that file on a different computer that just got disconnected for me. So I'm going to connect again. And right now I'm going to use a computer in different Azure subscription. I did have some local computers on Hyper-V cluster that I was going to use for this demo, but it ended up a little bit, things got complicated, so we are going to use Azure server. Right, so connecting, give me a minute. Okay, going to make it a full screen, just a second. All right, so this is some test server that for some reason is not moving. And I don't use this server for any like real purposes, so we can play with it. But just to make things clear, the Azure Arc agent is actually a different agent than you would typically use or have for other Azure services. And this is something that Microsoft is actually working on right now. So there are a few agent dependent services in Azure. Like for example, if you want to run Azure Backup from one individual virtual machine, you have to install agent. If you want to run, for example, Windows or Azure Update Management from one individual virtual machine, you have to again install agent. And if you want to run Azure Arc, you have to again install the agent. And those are all different agents. And you don't have to have all three of them if you install Azure Arc. But if you start building services one by one, then you will end up installing 3 or even more agents on your machine. Microsoft is working on that. I was told during few Q&A with some Microsoft stuff that this is going to be unified, but at the moment we have to live with many different agents. All right, so I'm copying my script and should be copied there right now. If this demo works, it would be great. While we are waiting, let me just show you what happens here. Once we add our server to Azure, we get some information about it, and that's the name of the server, if the status, if it's connected, if it's on, if it's running. We get the resource group, in which one is it, the location. Basically, this is not the physical location of the server, obviously, but this is the location of resource group. We get the subscription and we get the type. What's important here is that this server will receive the resource ID in Azure, and with that, other services in Azure can see it exactly as an Azure virtual machine, and that enables us to run all the configurations we want to use. Okay. All right. This virtual machine is somehow slow. I'm waiting for the right click. Guys, don't forget to ask questions. Hoping to be able to answer all of them. That's very slow. So this is not the main connected computer. It's just one single computer that I have admin rights on, and the requirements for the installation of the agent depends. You don't have to necessarily be admin on it, so there are ways to do it. But this is probably one of the tasks that normal user wouldn't be doing anyway, so it's probably better if you do it. Okay, come on. If you do it with admin rights. Okay, sorry for the delay here. I'm hoping now I'll be able to open the script and run the script so you can see that the agent is being installed. All right, so desktop. Okay, that's our script. And let's run it. If you actually need to do a troubleshooting on connections, there are some even tools that can be used to parse the log and read you the specific logs. Azure also provides logs in their Azure environment, and you can also troubleshoot it according to logs that are inside of your virtual machine or your server. For me, from my personal feeling or an experience, I found this service very stable, and it works well even without any kind of VPNs or connections. I didn't have to troubleshoot any production settings. I did find, however, that the time to deploy some policies, it is usually longer than it takes to deploy those policies to servers that are in Azure. Okay. I don't know if it's just me or we can see here that we got some. Oh, okay, right. We have to log in. I completely forgot about this because I usually do it now on scale. So we will have to log in with this device.
Can you please increase the font size?
Oh, yes, sure. Sure, I didn't realize that. Okay, I'm going to increase the font size. Okay, so the message I got here is that I need to open a browser and perform the device login. And that's one of the steps that need to be done for the onboarding. If you are doing it like this manual way, one by one. I personally do it the other way, which is more on scale, and then you don't have to do this step individually. Okay, almost there. I hope you can all see it now, the text, that it's readable. We are not going to be using this server for too long. I'm just going to show you now I'm just going to complete the onboarding process, and then we are going to go back to our Azure portal. So this should be okay. So this message that I got here is because I am using Azure Machine to connect it to different Azure. This is not something that you will have to deal with every time, but unfortunately I have to do it. All right, so I'm going to enter that here. 1 second, and we should be back in our demo. Okay, so this is what I got, and you can now close this window, which is okay. And now we go back to our portal, and from here, in a few minutes, we should see our server connected. We don't have that yet. It might take a few minutes. And so I believe that script still needs to continue to perform, but in a few minutes later, this should be connected. Right. So instead of waiting, I would like to actually go back to this picture here and maybe discuss what features we can use from the Azure Arc itself. So we mentioned that we have some features that can be used without Azure Arc, like Azure Update Management and so on. But Azure Arc brings us specifically usage, for example, of Azure policies and Azure tags and RBAC configuration. And what that means for us is that I can now create the Azure policy, and the scope of that policy can be the virtual machine that I have in my on-premises environment. Of course, some policies will not work because they are specific to Azure resources, but most of the policies and built-in policies will work because they try to audit or enforce specific setting, and that settings, of course, can exist in Azure, in on-premises environment, and you can use it for that purpose. I use it, for example, to enforce naming policies and some things like that. But the main purpose for me for using Azure Arc is to have one dashboard in Azure portal where I can see all the virtual machines that are inside of the on-premises environment or inside of the Azure, and I can manage them or see them at least from one place. Okay, so we are still waiting, and now we can see that server is there. Perfect. It got connected, and now when I click on the server, I get the picture that is the picture that you will expect on your Azure virtual machine. Of course, this virtual machine right now doesn't have any other services connected, but from here we can see basic information like operating system. We can see that it's connected. We can add tags. That's great. We can start managing access, applying RBAC roles, which means that we can manage from here who from Azure can manage our virtual machine. That's great stuff. We can also apply logs. And if you're not familiar with Azure logs, it allows us to lock or prevent accidental deletion, prevent accidentally deleting a resource, or prevent making changes into that resource. And the lock can be applied, and that means that someone else cannot accidentally delete or change from within Azure. Of course, you can still delete it on premises. Azure cannot prevent you from doing that, but at least here in Portal, you can see it like that. Okay. So it would be nice to apply some policy. So let's see how and how we can do that. So basically we go to on data resource, we go to policies, or you can do it the same way from your policy screen in Azure Portal. You will have to select the scope. Here we have scope already selected because we are on that resource. And we can select from existing policy definitions. And you can see here, we still have a bunch of policies that are there that will work for us. And once you select the policy, you can apply it and you can do it. So how about we apply some policies? All right. Okay. So disk encryption should be applied on virtual machines. That's a great example. Effect is audit. Right. So for me to be able to do this, to access the server that is on premises, I need to have some kind of identity that will be given access. Of course, Azure by default doesn't give you access, doesn't get access to log into your on-premises server. But I'm going to skip that in this demo because I already have management policy in that other subscription. I already have the identity that I can use for that. So we created a policy assignment. This will now take some time, and the expected result of this will be that it's non-compliant because as far as I remember, the disk here, the disk drive C is the only disk, it's not encrypted, it doesn't use BitLocker, so I will get here the non-compliant. We can also have some other policies that are not just in audit mode, but it can also make changes and be applied to our server. Okay, so that's all for the demo. I actually don't have any other slides to show. I hope this brings some clarity of what Azure services we have and what the Azure Arc actually is. I focused on Azure Arc because I think it combines all of those services that I mentioned before, and all of them can be managed from the Azure Arc or used with the Azure Arc, and that's why that was the focus of the talk today. But also you can think about it that all of those services can be used individually, and they all complement each other. They don't compete with each other. So it's easy to start creating backups. It's easy to start adding new disks and resources to your virtual machines that you have on premises. even synchronize files and stuff like that. And for the hybrid management on top of it, that you can manage things on premises from Azure, is something that really, unless you start using it, is maybe doesn't look like a super useful, but once you start using it, you will see that having one very nice dashboard inside of your Azure portal where you can see all of your on-premises servers is really saving a lot of time for everything. Okay, so right, so I see that we have questions. Perfect. So the first question I answered. If it's not the answer you were looking for, then please specify more. The second question is, can I use multiple cloud vendors on Arc? Yes, and that's the beauty of it. So I personally have Azure Arc connected to Amazon Web Services and on premises, and I can see those servers from Azure portal. So yes, that works great. And then you can apply policies and all those features through the Azure Arc on your servers that you have in, for example, in AWS. And the last question I see here is that, can I manage Kubernetes clusters outside of Azure Arc, with Azure Arc? Yes, that feature is now currently in preview, but you can definitely start using it and testing it. It allows you exactly what you mentioned here, is to connect your Kubernetes clusters that you have on premises or somewhere else, and see that here in the Kubernetes management in Azure portal. I actually don't know. That feature was for a long time in a private preview and came to the public preview now, so you can test it. Microsoft doesn't actually provide information about when things will become GA because they're still working on it. But since Microsoft recently introduced support of Windows inside of the Kubernetes, this was one of the things that was discussed heavily during some discussions I was participating in, and I hope it will become generally available soon. Okay. So one more question. Okay. That wasn't much. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any other questions?
Maybe I didn't show my contact details in the beginning because I started sharing my screen too soon. If you have any questions, you can reach me out on Twitter or LinkedIn, or even send me an email. I'll be happy to answer and help you with any problems you have, or at least point you into the right direction so we can find the answers you need.
Okay, many thanks for this great presentation and demo. As a developer, I learned so much stuff about Azure Hybrid Services and of course Azure Arc. I think everyone attended to the session today and will watch it on YouTube later. Think same with me. So thank you, Vukasin, and see you on the next session.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.